Welcome everybody to the session from VR to MR, mixed reality in learning and training. I hope you've been attending other really interesting sessions today. And so if I can begin with this presentation by, next slide. All right, so
I guess you're muted, Ping.
hello, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. All right, so I guess let me just restart my intro then. Just wanted to welcome, thank you, Ali, for the point. So I just wanted to welcome everybody to the session from VR to MR, mixed reality and learning and training. I hope you've all been attending really cool sessions in the last 2 days. And so if you've, just as a slight warning, if you have attended my previous sessions in previous years, there might be a slight overlap of content, but not too much. But just for the benefit of, the newer people attending, I'm just going to go over some of the basics of the technology so that everybody can at least have an idea. And then from there, we can move on to the central topic of mixed reality. So that's what I'm going to propose for everybody today. If I can just take 30 seconds to introduce myself. So my name is Ping. I'm a learning experience designer at eConcordia. In case you're not familiar with us, we were founded in 2001 by Concordia University. And our mandate is essentially to develop and host the online credited courses that are offered at the university. So we're basically providing support and help to faculty members to develop online courses. But once the online courses are running, we're also there to provide general support for the professors and also the students while the courses are going live. So we're basically a multidisciplinary team. I'm just one of many at the Concordia, but we're essentially, like learning experience designers, interactive developers, videographers. We're really a multidisciplinary team to ensure that we can provide this help to support not only the students, but also the professors who are working for us. So with that out of the way, this is the little agenda that I would like to propose for us today. Not too ambitious, just a few elements because the session is not very long anyway. So it's really just an informational session to share some information with you and some ideas for you to think about. So the first topic really is about VR, AR, MR, XR. It's really about figuring out a little bit the R's, as I call it. And then to make it a little bit easier for us to understand what each of these mean, we're going to anchor them based on some case studies of projects that are going on at Concordia. And then finally, talk a little bit about what I would say like path forward. So where are we going from where we're at today? Because some of these technologies are pretty new. So without further ado, let's dive right into the story of the R's, right? So the first one I'd like to talk about is what we call virtual reality. So VR, as some of you may have heard before, the idea in a 30-second summary is that the person puts on a virtual reality headset and basically has their vision completely obscured. So all they see in the headset is basically virtual, and they can have quite a high level of interactions within this virtual world. So this would be like, one example of what we call virtual reality. The other one, AR, is what it's called augmented reality. In this particular case, we're essentially layering virtual or 3D or whatever you want to call it, non-physical elements into the physical world, usually through the usage of mobile devices, so such as phones, tablets, etc., in that nature. So in these cases, usually, I'd say usually, the interaction's a little bit more limited. So it's, for example, being able to place the object around, resize it, spin it around, do little basic manipulations. So this would be, again, the quick, 10-second summary of what augmented reality would be. I'm going to show some case studies later to make it a little bit more clear. So even if it's not super clear for you right now, that's perfectly fine. Hopefully the examples will show more details. And then finally, MR, which is, I guess, the newest the newcomer to the block, and it's the mixed reality, the mix in mixed reality. I sometimes think maybe it can mean getting you all mixed up, but essentially what the mix means is that you're mixing reality with the virtual. So it's really blending the two together. and you can interact with both simultaneously, and that's why it's called mixed reality. And the level of interaction can actually be similar to virtual reality, so to that level of engagement and intensity. So I guess this was like the quick three, right? So and all these three, so VR, AR, MR, all fall into this umbrella term called XR. I did not come up with the term, so I'm just rolling with how people call them. But so I think one interesting way of looking at these technologies is perhaps to look at it in terms of a spectrum. So on the one hand, you have, reality, or as say physical reality as we know it, and on the other extreme, you have virtual reality, where uh, the virtual is completely taking over and replacing the physical reality. You have augmented reality that's a little bit close to the physical world in that sense. And mixed reality really is this kind of middle ground that encompasses both the physical and the virtual world. So in this particular case, you're essentially the definition can vary a little bit depending on the specific use case that you're looking at for mixed reality. So this is kind of, I would say, the quick summary of like giving you some terminologies. Just to make all these things a little bit more concrete, I just wanted to go through a few quick examples of case studies that are happening at Concordia, so that you can basically attach something real and something concrete to these, perhaps if you're new to this, abstract concepts of technology. So if we start with virtual reality, as I've mentioned before, it's all about fully immersing the user into a virtual environment. So, in one of the contexts where virtual reality was used at Concordia was it was developed actually for a online course called SOC 280, which essentially deals with the history and society of Quebec society in general. So, in one of the primary chapters that is dedicated to Montreal, the professor wanted to bring up a particular subject matter to the students, which is the Faubourg-Amelin district. Uh, the professor already sent out his students throughout the city to visit different landmarks and to do reflection pieces on this. So, for example, he would encourage the students to go on Wellington Street and then walk through the street and then do observational work and then do reflection papers. So it's already a very physical, there has a very physical, traveling component to the course. But in this particular case, the question was, how can we bring up this subject about a place that no longer exists? Because um, in the image that we share over here, we're showing basically the whole area where the Faubourg Amelin district used to be, and what it looks like today. So in 1963, the entire neighborhood was demolished by the city of Montreal. Thousands of residents were evicted and to make essentially room for parking lot, if you can look at it that way. So this somewhat obscure facet of Montreal history was something that the professor wanted to bring back to the forefront. So this is why the conversation of implementing virtual reality learning material came in, because as I mentioned before, reality allows you to immerse the user in a virtual environment. It was a natural fit for us to basically recreate the Faubourg in virtual reality and to allow the student to do this exercise of time travel. So in this particular case, it was an apartment that was recreated in the Faubourg using archival material from the city hall, but also from Radio-Canada and the Bibliothèque nationale du Québec, to basically recreate this authentic time travel experience for the student to just, go back and get us a glimpse of how life really was in the Faubourg. So these are just some examples of, daily life objects where the student is interacting with them and then learning about the residents' life and the story, the history of the Faubourg through this kind of interactive, immersive environment. So this is an example of application of how VR can be applied to a learning context. Now, secondly, augmented reality. So remember that we're talking about overlaying this virtual element on top of, the physical world. So in this particular case, I'm not going to go through all the history. If you want to learn more about it, please look up the photogrammetry talk that I gave last year. It goes much more in depth about this. But if I can summarize it in 30 seconds, the idea was that there's a historical monument within Montreal's Chinatown that was at risk of being demolished. So because of real estate development projects. So the idea here was for us to capture and digitize this building into a 3D virtual model and to be able to share this model with whoever would like to consult it. So if you have your phone, please feel free to scan the QR code there. It'll bring you directly to the web page. If your phone is augmented reality capable, you should be able to interact with this model and drop it into, for example, the room that you're currently in, and play around with it a little bit, manipulate it, etc. So this is kind of an idea, a one use case that augmented reality could bring to a learning context of, for example, but in this particular case, it's not restricted to architecture because we've had cases where professors, for example, in biology or chemistry, have brought up the idea of offering the student the ability to, for example, drop molecules into into their space to manipulate it, to visualize it, to, explore it, engage with the content a little bit more than just, for example, looking at 2D schematics in their books or watching videos on YouTube. So it's not really restricted to architecture or history. It's really a content neutral technology. So this is an example of augmented reality. Now, mixed reality, the new kid on the block, which also is a little bit more the central topic for the presentation today. So I think there are some assumptions that we can look into in terms of what mixed reality is trying to what are the problems that mixed reality is trying to solve. In this particular case, these are just some assumptions. They're not the entire list of assumptions. But for example, the argument that we can get more information and better quality information by mixing virtual on top of the physical world. Uh, there's also the idea that allowing physical objects to interact with virtual objects can also unlock many training and learning possibilities. Uh, and the third element that I wanted to mention, at least today, is the idea of remote connection. This will all make a little bit more sense once I move on to the details of the use case. But so these are basically because mixed reality is a fairly new, fairly comparatively newer technology compared to the other ones. It's basically a lot of debate and discussions are happening around this technology. So if I can move to a slight case study to anchor this, for the last year, we've been working with a team of a surgical team from France to basically explore the applications of mixed reality in a medical context. So there are certain challenges that our surgical team, the partners, are looking into solving and hoping to use mixed reality to solve them. So these are just some of the challenges they're encountering. This is the situation in France. I don't know how similar or it is in Canada, but I feel that the medical field probably shares a lot of their challenges across the board, across national boundaries. So essentially, one of the challenges that the surgeons are encountering is that um, operating rooms are not places that people can just walk into, right? So they're basically spaces that are used to save lives, to perform, very important surgeries. So trying to schedule training time around surgeries is actually not a very practical approach for surgical teams. So this is something that they're trying to think about whether or not mixed reality can offer a solution to this problem. There's also a surgeon shortage happening at least in their situation. And the issue is that because there are not enough surgeons, the training process is quite slow. And because the training process is slow, it's also producing fewer surgeons. And it locks them into this vicious cycle that they're essentially trying to improve on and to break the cycle. And it takes a lot of time to train a competent and confident surgeon. So, and furthermore, because there's a surgeon shortage, access to these experienced surgeons who are in a situation to teach people is also limited because they're usually also performing surgeries. So it creates a situation where it's somewhat difficult for them to expedite their training process. And this is why they're looking into using different technologies to see if it can resolve some of these challenges or at least alleviate them. So what I'm going to show next is just a really short video of a prototype that we've been developing with them that showcases some of the potential of mixed reality being used in the context of surgical training. Um, and I'm going to pause the video like here and there just to give you a little bit of quick narration. So as you can see in this particular case, we're actually using your just your physical hands to manipulate these tools. So we've opted to not essentially using hand tracking technology to use this to complement it with the interactions. And the important part is because the hand and gestures are extremely important in surgical training. I will get back to that topic very shortly. But the idea here is to have these virtual tools that the student could use their physical hands to manipulate and to use in the context of training. So the idea here is to allow the student, and you can, in this particular case, we're showing a regular office room where we've dropped a virtual patient with the virtual operating room. So it allows a certain level of flexibility for students to deploy these operating rooms wherever they are. And the idea here is to allow them this flexibility. Not only in this particular case, we're looking at uh, um, surgery for removing a gallbladder, but it could be open heart surgery. It could be whatever surgery that we're looking at. And it can be just using this virtual operating room to swap out the scenario, swap out the patient, and then continue and pursue your training depending on your specialization. So the idea here is not, just to clarify, not replace real life or real in-person training for the surgeons. Absolutely not. So this is very important for them. But the idea is so to allow this flexibility for future surgeons to practice, practice, and practice on their own time with a certain level of flexibility. So in this particular case, what we're trying so in this particular case, what we're trying to illustrate is that um, once the student shows up for their physical training, they would have repeated the process, 50 times, 100 times, 200 times, if you will, in virtually. And in this particular case, once they show up into their physical train into the physical in-person training, they can get the most bang for their buck, essentially. So the idea here is not to replace physical, but to actually allow the student more resources to use in their training process. So especially when it deals with high risk or complex tasks, where it's better for them to practice a little bit more before building to give them some experience for this. So to build like the video mentions the muscle memory and for them to have the knowledge. So this is really the exploration angle is about developing this flexible tool to give them this simulated approach. So in this particular case, one of the important topic is giving them this reflex to deal with what they euphemistically call incidents. So for example, bleeding, etc. So the important part is really that, for them to repeat in a low risk environment so that when they show up physically into the in-person training, they're a little bit more prepared. So, and mixed reality does not limit you to staying in this mixed scenario. It can be switching to full virtual reality can be as simple as just pressing a button, and then you're back into this fully immersive environment. So it allows you this level of flexibility when we're talking about mixed reality. So this is just a particular use case of how mixed reality can be used into a training context. So these are some of the challenges that I've mentioned before, so you can see the parallel in this particular case. So if we can just start wrapping up for the path forward angle. Uh, so you've probably heard in the news about people using like new virtual Apple releasing their new headsets, introducing new ways of working in mixed reality. So like reading your emails or typing things or playing games. This is really the trend of the industry right now, where all the manufacturers are moving towards this direction. So all their newer headsets have this mixed reality capability. which indicates that that's really where the I would say the center of gravity of the technology is moving towards right now. And one of the interesting thing I mentioned earlier is how important gestures are for surgeons. So they've insisted on the idea that it's very important for them to be able to show a young surgeon how to use the tools and how to use their hands in this particular context. In these examples, you will notice that all the physical hands will always have this kind of silhouette, shadowy hand that's overlaid on top of it. And this is really what mixed reality gives you. So it gives you, it lets you see your physical hands, but it also tells you where your virtual hands are moving. So in this particular case, the surgeons are really thinking about trying to push this technology in a way that can allow a young surgeon to remotely see the hands of their mentor. So in this case, for example, if the mentor is in Montreal and then the student is in Paris, that the mentor can remotely connect and project their virtual hands on top of the surgeon, the young surgeon's hands, so that they can show them very carefully how to move their hands in this particular context. Uh, what's really interesting about this is because in the early stages of the pandemic, when all the faculty members at Concordia transitioned to remote teaching, emergency remote teaching, some of our professors in fine arts have mentioned before the challenge of how in some of the studio classes, so much of the training and the practice comes from gestures. So, for example, gestural training, how to use a pencil, how to hold the paintbrush, etc. So we immediately started seeing this parallel where if it's good for the surgeon, it's for sure good for the artist, and we can start seeing this commonality between usage of this technology and applied in different contexts. So this kind of newer mentorship kind of angle is increasingly relevant in a lot of training situations. Microsoft has long heralded the idea of using mixed reality in a virtual assistant context. So, for example, you're looking at a machine and you're trying to figure out what part to like remove or tinker with. So this is just an extension of this application of using this mixture of reality with virtual in these contexts. So it goes back to these assumptions about whether or not mixed reality can answer these questions. And of course, we're still in the early phase. No, not so early, but I think it's a technology that's constantly evolving right now, and a lot of people are basically using it to do all kinds of exploration and all kinds of applications in different contexts. So yeah, I guess we'll have to keep going, and I think we're for sure hoping to, as part of Concordia, to be part of this journey, of be part of this growth and exploration for this kind of technology. So I hope it didn't go too fast, but it was really a quick flyby for giving you a quick informational session about what's happening in this field of XR. So thank you very much. If you have to go, please don't hesitate to go. But I'm happy to stick around a little bit for some questions.